It's the Best Lifing Show.
This podcast is your ultimate guide to holistic health and wellness.
Our team of Best Lifers shared their stories.
Wait. What is this Best Lifing?
We transform your life from ordinary
to extraordinary.
And help you live your dreams.
So now,
let's start Best Lifing.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Best Lifing Show with Be Unique. My name is Julia Brodska, and I'm the author of the international best-selling book, Best Lifing. It's all about helping people overcome limiting beliefs and live their dreams and create fulfillment in the 7 areas of life. Thank you so much for joining us. So today we have a very exciting episode for you, but first let me introduce our co-host / guest. Her name is Krystle, and she is our good vibes goddess. Hi Krystle, how you going?
Hi, it's so great to be here.
No, thanks for joining us. So Krystle, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am the Good Vibes Goddess, and I typically help with the Best Lifing events.
She says help, but what she really means is like she runs the whole entire show. Isn't that right, Krystle?
Yes, and I send out lots of good vibes and vibrations.
Aside from that, Krystle also makes sure like the events are running on track and everything flows really well. And that is why we have selected her to be tonight's guest for this topic. Our topic today is boundaries, and we're gonna really look into where they need to be set and do you have them. So definitely Krystle is the expert for this because she's the one who enforces all of the boundaries in our events and of course does it while making sure everyone's having a great time, and that's why she's our good vibes guru. So Krystle, tell us a little bit about your story, your background, where you're from.
I am originally from Texas, Austin, Texas to be specific, the city of music. I am a third-year law student at St. Thomas University School of Law. And having to juggle law school, my daughter, work, relationships, and a social life, if there's anything that I know something about, it's boundaries.
Yeah, and I definitely see that from you every single day. So tell me, how would you define boundaries as a universal thing?
If I were to define boundaries, it would be knowing when to draw the line. Whether it's in your relationships or at work, you got to know when to draw the line. It's being able to say no in a situation that does not benefit you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So do you want to give us some examples of a situation that doesn't matter for you?
Oh, absolutely. If I gave you guys some examples, one in particular would be time. Since I'm a law student, I'm super duper busy and everybody wants my time, especially Julia. And I have to be able to say no. No, because I have some other obligation, whether it's attending an executive board meeting or needing to get my schoolwork done.
Yeah, and I really actually respect and appreciate when you just straight up say no to me. So tell me, what about in a situation when you really want to go to something, I don't know, there's a big party on, but you know you've got a deadline. How do you say no to that? How do you hold up your boundaries there?
Well, it's simple. First, you have to know what your boundaries actually are and weigh what is more important to you. And at this moment in time, my school is more important to me, so I simply just say no.
I love that. Do you ever get FOMO?
What's FOMO?
Oh, FOMO is or maybe it's an Australian term, sorry guys. It's fear of missing out. It's an acronym for fear of missing out.
Oh, absolutely. I always get FOMO. I'm a super energetic person. I love to go out, so yes, I always get FOMO.
And so what do you say to yourself in your head when that happens?
What I say to myself in my head is it's going to benefit me more to own up to my obligations and do what needs to be done at this very moment in time, and that will ultimately pay off versus going out and having fun and potentially risking all the money that I've invested and regretting going out.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's really cool that you've got the discipline to be able to do that. So tell us, maybe tell us how you got there. let's start with a story of when, maybe a time when you haven't had great boundaries and you've done something that you regret, and then how you sort of overcame that and transitioned to having boundaries in that area, for example.
So this example doesn't pertain to school at all. It actually pertains to my dating life or my relational portion of my life. I'm pretty sure other people have been in similar circumstances where they have been interested in a guy or a girl and have been pursued, and instead of telling that person or communicating with them your boundaries, you allowed that person to exceed those boundaries in some way, shape, or form.
All right, so let's get juicy. Tell us the actual story that happened.
Okay. So this is kind of personal, but I'm definitely willing to share this with you guys. So there was one instance where there was this guy who had a crush on me, and he invited me out. So I said, okay, we can go out. We can go to the casino and have a good time. But he had a girlfriend at the time, and he tried to pursue me while we were at the casino. And rather than voice or communicate with him that I was uncomfortable with him speaking to me in a particular way, I allowed him to cross those boundaries.
And so what exactly do you mean? Like, what did he do crossing the boundaries?
He just spoke to me in a very disrespectful and sexual way, and it was very uninviting. And I didn't feel that it was appropriate considering that he had a girlfriend.
And so what did you do about it?
Ultimately, that particular day, I didn't say or do much, but after that, the next time that we hung out, I made sure that I communicated with him that if we hang out, we'll only be hanging out under these specific conditions.
Okay, so this is a really good point to make out there. So let's talk about, how did you feel differently than, for example, the night that you didn't set the boundaries, and then as opposed to when you did later the next time you hung out?
So the night that I didn't set the boundaries, I just felt uncertain, super uncomfortable.
Doing something wrong?
Yeah, I was doing something wrong, and in actuality, I hadn't done anything wrong. It was actually him who was being the perpetrator and committing the wrong acts, but yet I'm the one who felt the regret and felt bad for it.
So would you agree to say that potentially, even though you might not actually be doing something wrong, if you're not living or if you're not enforcing your boundaries, you're essentially not living up to who you are and valuing your own values, and that's potentially why we feel guilty about it?
Absolutely. So what about you, Julia? What about your story? Do you have any stories for us?
Oh, for sure. There's been so many times where I don't uphold my boundaries. So for me, mine was more when I was working in the corporate world. Actually, this used to happen in bars and restaurants when I was younger as well. And Krystle, I'm sure you've experienced this too. You have these wonderful Saturday plans, whether it's a birthday or, you're going to go out to dinner with your significant other. And then your restaurant manager comes up to you and says, oh, Billy called in sick. I'm going to need you to pick up an extra shift. And, really your boundaries should be bit of work-life balance, or potentially, unless you needed the money, you should be able to say no if you've got other commitments or there's something that you're really looking forward to doing that's more important to you at that point in time. But there was definitely a stage in my life where very often I'd be scared. I'd be scared that I'd get in trouble if I said no, or potentially I might get my shifts cut, or the boss won't like me, and definitely those kind of circumstances, I did not uphold my boundaries very well, and that then created resentment, which then turned potentially into poor performance for me. And eventually, I wasn't doing as well as I could be doing, and that was mainly because I wasn't upholding my boundaries. Potentially the manager wasn't even going to do anything, and it wasn't their fault. So I definitely take ownership for that one. And then once I learned how to just say no to things that were outside that line that you mentioned at the beginning, definitely I noticed a lot of different changes in my life and my happiness.
Yeah, I've definitely done that too.
Yeah, we all have. So, all right, let's talk about some times where we've been good with our boundaries. Give me a recent one that you've definitely like stood by what you believe and it's turned out positively for you.
One time when my best friends invited me to Tulum, I really wanted to go, but instead of going to Tulum, I told my friends, listen, I can't go this time, I'll go next time. And yes, I wanted to go to Tulum, but ultimately I stayed in Miami, I did my work, my schoolwork, wrote my paper, and I felt awesome about it. And to top that off, I did really well in the assignment, and that's why boundaries are so important.
I love that one, Krystle.
So what's yours?
All right, so mine was actually like with the help of someone else. So it was kind of cheating. I didn't do it on my own. But when I first started the Best Lifing business, I was not very good at being, let's say, a businesswoman. So I hired this photographer for a website photo shoot. And, throughout the day we got to know each other. And, he told me all these stories about how he's working hard and he's in school doing lots of hours and stuff like that and how busy he was. And then later that night, we were having a bit of a party, and one of my friends noticed that I was on my phone a lot. And they asked me, like, why are you on your phone so much? And I said, I'm just trying to sort out this thing for the photographer. And my friend said to me, didn't you already sort it out when you, agreed on the contract? And I said, yeah, but, he's busy and he can't get the photos done in time. And my friend just said to me, you had a contract, you agreed X amount of money for X amount of photos. And in the end, my friend helped me draft a message saying, look, I really need this by tomorrow as we agreed, and draw that boundary, which I probably wouldn't have done myself. So that's why I said it was cheating earlier. But the moral of the story is, had I not had upheld my boundaries, my whole team would have suffered, because we had a publication writing about us the next day, which would have brought traffic to our website. And then without having, a really sharp, good looking website, I'll be letting the team down, because potentially people won't get the full experience of our website because I hadn't done my part by not upholding my boundaries. So that was definitely a good learning curve, but that was also a time where, with help, I upheld my boundaries in a positive way.
So in that sense, we also want to talk about not just positive boundaries versus negative boundaries, but that it's okay to push your boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely, because when you push your boundaries, you actually get to grow. So let's talk about times when we've pushed our boundaries and have found benefit from it, because it is definitely good to push your boundaries as well, not always just uphold them.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree with you more. So, fun fact, I can't swim, but I continue to push my boundaries. I've been parasailing, I've been kayaking, I've been paddle boarding. Whoa. I love the water. I continue to jump back in the water because each time I push my boundaries, I feel liberated.
That's so awesome. So tell me about where that that fear of the water came from initially, and then I guess how do you overcome it to be able to push those boundaries in the first place and jump back in the water every time?
Well, originally my father, he's super scared of the water. So I grew up not being able to go to the pool, not being able to go to water parks. Same with my mother, same thing. Neither one of my parents can swim. So I never experienced going to the beach or anything like that.
So you're worried of drowning? Is that a thing?
Yeah, my parents were super fearful of drowning.
Oh, wow.
And just fear of the unknown. And my friends would always invite me to, participate in all these different water sports. And I realized how much I truly loved the water. And each time I went, I realized if I just push my boundaries a little bit more, one day I'll be able to swim.
Yeah. What about the actual fear though that kicks in when you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna drown? Because I've definitely had moments like that myself.
No, absolutely. But ultimately the liberation and exhilaration that I get,
it's coming.
Yes, whenever I get into the ocean is just it outweighs.
Yeah.
It outweighs
everything. Yeah,
everything.
for sure.
Another fun fact. So recently I was in a Texas lake with my best friends, and they said, "Hey, Krystle, do you want to go down the lake or the river with us?" Yeah. So there's no tube. They were expecting me to float down this river and not have any type of support. So I said, okay, why not? Pushing my boundaries once more. I lie on my back and I'm trying to float down the river. And then all of a sudden there's a sinkhole and I realize my entire body is beneath the water and I'm pedaling for dear life. But ultimately I don't regret it because once again pushing my boundaries.
Oh my gosh, I've never even heard about going down a river without a bloody thing. I can swim and I wouldn't even do that. That is definitely pushing some boundaries for sure.
So Julia, you want to give us a life story? It doesn't have to be life or death. But...
Yeah, mine's definitely not going to be life or death for sure. My story actually taught me a very great saying that I live by these days, which is get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
So Jules, what do you mean by that?
So pretty much I found myself living in a bit of a comfort zone stage, and it was a bit subconscious, where I surrounded myself with people who always needed my advice in a sense, and it made me kind of live in a way where I thought I was the expert all the time and I knew it all and whatever. But then I got introduced to a new group that I started hanging out with, and I was the dumbest person in the room all the time. So they'd have conversations about business and American politics and finance and all these different things where at some points in my life I thought I was really smart, but when I'm standing in this new room, I was the dumbest person. And at first I was very uncomfortable, obviously not being able to contribute to the conversations or having anything relevant to say. But then this was a very lovely and accepting group, so obviously like that helped a lot. But what I learned from it was when you are the dumbest person in the room, for lack of better words, you actually learn and grow. And when you can admit to that and get comfortable with that uncomfort of not being good enough, you're actually going to grow a lot and you're going to be able to learn. And most successful people are willing to help and teach you as long as you take on their advice and implement it and, you know, make their time valuable and not a waste. So that's what I mean by getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Julia, I couldn't agree with you more. There's this famous quote by Confucius that I absolutely love, and it says, if you are the smartest person in the room, then you're clearly in the wrong room. And that's why it's so important to constantly push your boundaries.
So true, and I love that quote. I actually haven't heard that one before.
You're welcome.
Oh, wait, thank you, mate.
So let's talk about how you know if you've actually got boundaries. So Julia, what's your thoughts on that?
How do you know? Okay, that's a good question. So my thoughts would be it would start from paying attention to your emotions, because your emotions are usually going to tell you how you're feeling about something that you're doing. And if you feel negative emotion, that could potentially be a sign that you either haven't created a boundary about it or you're not upholding to that, right? So you could think about times when, you know, you give away too much of your time doing things that you don't really want to do, or when you should be doing something else that's going to benefit you more. You could probably use a sign like toxic relationships if you've got a lot of friends or a significant other, or just in general, if you're feeling that, you know, you're getting taken advantage by other people, you probably haven't set clear boundaries, or you may not know what they are. What are your thoughts on this, Krystle?
In addition to what you said, I think that if you're making too many sacrifices for other people that are at your own expense, that's another way you can recognize that you do not have boundaries.
Oh, and especially if you find yourself acting a bit passive aggressive towards something, because usually, like, if I said, hey, Krystle, I don't feel like doing this, then I've set a boundary with you and you've got a choice to, you know, uphold that or not. But if I'm acting passive aggressive towards you, that's probably a sign that I haven't identified that or haven't communicated it to you.
Yeah, and I think it's an inclination that you didn't want to do it in the first place.
Absolutely. So then what do, right? You got to set some boundaries. So let's talk about some top ways that, you know, we've done it in our own lives. Let's talk about the ways that you can set boundaries. What do you think on this?
There's plenty of ways to set boundaries. I think it's important to start with taking a moment and figuring out what exactly your boundaries are.
Yeah, I've done that before for sure in like relationships when I found myself being angry at things or passive aggressive. I just laid out what my boundaries exactly were, you know, like what do I want, what do I not want? And then once I've got that list clear in my head, I can then communicate it to the other person and give them the opportunity to either, you know, meet my boundaries or expectations. Or to not, because everybody's got the right, you know, if your boundaries are not aligned with what somebody else wants, they've got the right not to have to meet those. And I think it's very important that, you know exactly what they are, get them clear in your head, and then communicate them from a place of love and a place of, you know, wanting a positive outcome and a resolution. And that way you'll find that people usually respond in a way that is positive. And I guess, like, for the most part, right, we might be arguing about something, but with people you love, harmony is usually more important than the subject. So sometimes the solution to an argument or a problem is just about setting very clear boundaries and helping the other person understand why something's important to you.
And to add to that, I think it's important to think about the impact of your actions when you don't stick to your boundaries. Think about the amount of time you spent on something compared to the actual positivity that it contributed to your life.
And really, you just want to do things that make you feel good, right? Because life is all about fun and feeling good and enjoying yourself and achieving the things that you really want to, even if there's a struggle along the way or it may be difficult or challenging to push your boundaries. You just want to make sure that life is fun and life is good and you're enjoying it, because that's what we're really all here for.
Yeah, I completely agree. And sometimes I know that we want to help people and without exceeding our boundaries, and you can do that by offering an alternative. Say a friend asks you for a ride and you have something important to do, you can offer an alternative like grabbing an Uber for them.
But I think it's just very important that whatever you do, you're very direct and you're firm with your answer. You know, you don't fluff around and sort of mess around with the other person, because then that's where other emotions get brought in, and, you know, they can potentially get upset that because you weren't straightforward with them, you could have wasted their time or something like that. So that's where other problems can arise from that. The main reason, though, it's so important to set boundaries is because healthy boundaries are going to make you feel mentally and emotionally stable, and not having those can potentially, you know, make you lose your self-worth or your identity. So while you might be missing out on, you know, something you want to do, you got to think about the greater good. And I definitely had to go through this at one stage when my life was a bit of a mess. I was in a lot of debt. I was always out partying just to like impress people. I was buying things and bags and crap that I couldn't afford that were not very important to me. It was more about, you know, showing a status. And once I set those boundaries with myself and then with other people, you know, I started asking the question, like, is this aligned with what I want? And once I started asking that question and setting those boundaries, my whole entire life changed. So it's not just, you know, about proving something to someone or doing something or missing out on something. It's really about creating a life that you love living and you love waking up for. And this is definitely life-changing stuff. Just a simple move like setting some boundaries and sticking to it, you know? And if you think about it, not setting boundaries and, you know, people pleasing, that's going to come with some consequences. You know, you're going to create stress for yourself. You're going to be unhappy, potentially financial burdens. You'll be wasting time. You're going to have relationship issues because your partner won't understand what you're looking for and what you want. You know, no one's a mind reader. So I've got the right to ask you, hey, Krystle, do you want to come and do this? Because I think it will be fun for you. But, you know, if you don't want to, you got to really let me know. Otherwise, I'm just playing a guessing game, right? And I'm potentially creating unnecessary tension. And then that's going to turn into resentment. And that is harder to come back from, right? And it's really like a never-ending job. So don't get hard on yourself when you fail, right? Like, I'm still working on things that I need to set boundaries on. And I'm sure you are as well, Krystle, right?
Absolutely. So one thing that I'm working on currently is putting myself first. I found myself not giving myself self-care, self-love, because I'm too busy running around doing everything on my to-do list.
And so how do you manage and continue to grow in that?
Recognition. I recognize that I'm still struggling with that and finding ways to minimize my to-do list so that I could find time for myself.
Yeah, one thing I've definitely found, and I do this a lot, like as humans, we naturally are good at criticizing ourselves. And the funny thing is, like, I asked a few people just as a bit of an experiment, how many things on your to-do list this week did you achieve perfectly? And the response from every single person was none. There's no such thing as perfection. You can't do everything perfectly. Oh, there's so many things I still had left to do. And then I said, well, how many things on your to-do list this week could you have improved? And of course, we got I should have been at this meeting and I forgot to call that person. And, they listed off a number of things. And that just goes to show that we're very, very good at criticizing ourselves, but we're not very good at giving ourselves that same level of positive feedback, right? And it's a very funny thing to do to ourselves, because the more you continue to criticize yourself and beat yourself down, the easier it is to give up, right? Because you're just going to feel like you're inadequate and you're not achieving what you want to achieve. So from that, one thing, because I do that a lot, like I always beat myself up, I didn't do this enough and I didn't do that enough and I could have done more of that. So one thing I started to do is I only have one day where I analyze the things that I could do better. And so that's about having boundaries with yourself. So when those thoughts come into my head, I disregard them, and I've made it 5 p.m. on Fridays where I analyze my week and decide on all the things that I could do better for next week. So what happens there is, instead of beating myself up every single day or every single hour or stressing about my to-do list, when those thoughts come into my head, I just kind of stop myself and go, nope, this is not self-analysis time. That's Friday, 5 p.m. It's still only Tuesday. And I tell myself that I'm doing quite fine and I'm doing the best that I can. And then I set that boundary with myself to not have negative self-talk, instead reinforcing myself with positive affirmations.
Speaking of affirmations, I like to reflect on my day by journaling. And when I journal, I typically write what happened in my day, and if it was a bad day, then I write about what I could have done differently and how I could have set boundaries. And that works the same for goals. I like to analyze my goals and determine how to meet those goals, and if I didn't meet those goals, what stopped me from meeting those goals. And usually the answer is in boundaries.
So in case we haven't convinced you already, there are many advantages of setting boundaries for both you and the other people in your life. Things like good mental health, even like avoiding a burnout because you're doing way too much and taking too much on your plate. You get to figure out your identity, and just in general, you'll have better emotional health from setting and sticking to your boundaries. So we really encourage you to go back and have a look. Have you got your boundaries set?
To summarize, you got to know your boundaries, be sure to communicate them clearly without emotion, and don't be scared to push your boundaries, especially if it's going to help you grow.
And so that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Thank you so much, Krystle, for joining us.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you again next week. Bye for now.
Bye, guys. Thanks for having me.
That's it for today. Thank you for joining us.
If you enjoyed the Best Lifing Show and you want to get in touch,
You can find and follow us on all social platforms or visit our website, bestlifing.com.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review.
Till next time, mates.
Stay blessed and best lifing.